At my dad's retirement party, Mom looked straight at me with cold eyes. "Marcus, you'll never be half the man your brother is. David is our real blessing." I felt my chest tighten, then I stood up slowly. "Fine. From today, David can handle everything. No more money from me." Everyone went quiet. Dad dropped his fork. "What money are you talking about? You never helped us with anything." I pulled out my phone, hands shaking. The bank records I showed them changed everything forever. My name is Marcus Thompson. I'm 30 years old, and I grew up in Pine Ridge, Montana. It's a tiny town where everybody knows your business before you do. Our house sat on Maple Street, painted yellow with a broken front gate that squeaked every time someone walked through. My younger brother David was born when I was 5. From day one, he could do no wrong. He had bright blue eyes that sparkled when he smiled. People would stop Mom at the store just to tell her how cute he was. Me? I was the quiet kid who hid behind Mom's legs. Dad worked at the lumber mill for 30 years. Every evening, he'd come home tired and covered in sawdust. But his face would light up when David ran to hug him. Mom worked at the bank downtown. She'd brag to her co-workers about David's latest drawing or his funny jokes. They never meant to hurt me, I think. But it was clear who their favorite was. David could sing, dance, and make everyone laugh. I liked building things with my hands and reading books about how machines worked. But to them, I was just the boring older brother. In school, David joined every club and made friends easily. Teachers loved him because he was funny and smart. I struggled to talk to people and spent lunch breaks in the library. My grades were okay, but David's were better. David won art contests while I built small robots nobody cared about. I remember one Christmas morning when I was 12. I had spent weeks building a wooden jewelry box for Mom. David gave her a card he made in 10 minutes. She hugged him tight and said, "This is beautiful, honey." Then she looked at my box and said, "That's nice too, Marcus." Those words stung worse than a bee. Dad would always say, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" whenever I brought home report cards. David made everything look easy while I worked twice as hard for half the praise. I didn't hate David. He was my little brother and I loved him. But every day I felt smaller and smaller, like I was disappearing. I built walls around my heart to stop the hurt from getting in. One summer day when I was 15, our family went to the county fair. David won a stuffed animal at the ring toss and gave it to Mom. She kissed his cheek and called him her little gentleman. I had saved my allowance for weeks to buy her cotton candy, but she was too busy taking pictures of David to notice. That night, I sat on my bed wondering if I mattered at all. Would anyone care if I just disappeared? These thoughts scared me, but I pushed them down deep where nobody could see them. When I turned 18, I thought things would change. I got accepted to State University for engineering. I was excited to study mechanical engineering and maybe finally make my parents proud. But at my graduation party, all anyone talked about was David's acceptance to the same university for business. "David's going to be a CEO someday," Dad told everyone. "Marcus will probably just fix cars or something." College was my escape. I found my passion in designing machines and solving problems. I made a few good friends who liked me for who I was. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. But every phone call home reminded me of my place in the family. "David made the dean's list again," Mom would say proudly. "How are your grades, Marcus?" When I told her about my engineering projects, she'd say, "That's nice, dear. Did I tell you about David's presentation?" David was studying business and marketing. He was the president of his fraternity and dated the prettiest girls on campus. Meanwhile, I spent my time in the engineering lab, working on projects that excited me but impressed no one at home. "You should be more social like David," Mom would lecture me during visits. "Girls like confident men, not shy ones who hide behind books." Dad would nod and add, "David knows how to network. That's how you get ahead in life." I tried to change myself to please them. I joined clubs I didn't like and went to parties that made me uncomfortable. But I was just pretending to be someone else. The real Marcus felt lost and alone. After graduation, I moved to Denver and got a job at a manufacturing company. I designed parts for airplanes and felt proud of my work. My salary was decent, and I lived in a small apartment near downtown. David graduated and moved back to Pine Ridge. He talked about starting his own marketing business, but mostly he lived at home and went out with friends. He had big dreams but no clear plans. I wanted to show my parents I was successful too. I sent them pictures of my apartment and told them about my projects. But Mom would just say, "That's wonderful, Marcus. David is working on something big. He might open an office in the city soon." Then Dad got sick. The doctors said his lungs were damaged from years of sawdust at the mill. He couldn't work anymore and had to retire early. Mom cut back her hours to take care of him. When Mom called to tell me about their money troubles, my heart broke. "The medical bills are so high, Marcus. I don't know how we'll manage." I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to send money home every month to help them. Not because I wanted praise, but because I loved them despite everything. I sent $1,500 each month, sometimes more when Dad needed expensive medicine. The problem was Mom and Dad didn't understand online banking. Every time I tried to explain it, Mom got confused. "Just send cash," she'd say. But cash wasn't safe to mail. That's when I thought of David. He lived right there in Pine Ridge and could help. I called him up and explained my plan. "I'll send the money to your account, and you can give it to Mom and Dad in cash. Simple, right?" David agreed immediately. "Sure, big brother. I'll take care of it." I trusted him completely. He was my little brother, and despite our differences, I believed he would do the right thing. Every month, I sent the money with a note saying for Mom and Dad's expenses. I lived on ramen noodles and didn't buy new clothes so I could send more. Sometimes I worked overtime just to have extra money for their medical bills. I never called to check if they got the money because I trusted David. I assumed Mom and Dad knew it came from me and were grateful. I felt good knowing I was helping, even if they never said thank you. David started posting pictures on social media of his new truck, expensive dinners, and weekend trips. I wondered where he got the money since he didn't have a steady job. But I figured maybe his business was finally taking off. Meanwhile, I ate cheap meals and wore the same clothes for years. I didn't mind because I thought I was helping my family. Every dollar I sent felt like proof that I cared, even if nobody noticed. During phone calls, Mom would complain about money. "The electric bill was so high this month," she'd sigh. "Dad's medicine costs more than our old house payment." These calls made me send even more money. I increased the amount to $2,000 some months. I took on freelance work fixing neighbors' computers just to have extra money to send. My apartment was tiny and my life was simple, but I felt proud helping my parents. David's social media showed him at fancy restaurants and wearing designer clothes. He posted photos from vacation trips with captions like "living the dream." I was happy he was doing well, even if I didn't understand how. Then I met Sarah at work. She was an accountant who helped with our budgets. She had kind eyes and a warm smile that made me feel comfortable. We started having lunch together and talking about our dreams. Sarah was the first person who really listened to me. When I told her about sending money to my parents through David, she looked concerned. "Marcus, that's really generous of you. Do your parents know the money comes from you?" I shrugged. "I assume David tells them. I just want to help without making a big deal about it." Sarah frowned. "Maybe you should check. Sometimes people aren't as honest as we think they are." Her words planted a seed of doubt in my mind, but I pushed it away. David was my brother. He wouldn't lie to me or steal from our parents. I trusted him because family is supposed to stick together. Sarah and I started dating, and she became my best friend. She encouraged me to pursue my dreams and made me feel worthy of love. "You're amazing, Marcus," she'd say. "Don't let anyone make you feel small." One evening, Sarah looked at my bank statements while helping me with my taxes. "Marcus, you've sent over $40,000 in 2 years. That's incredible. Your parents must be so grateful." I smiled proudly. It feels good to help them. They raised me, so it's the least I can do. But Sarah looked puzzled. "Have they ever thanked you or acknowledged what you're doing?" I realized they hadn't. Not once had Mom or Dad mentioned the money I sent. They still complained about bills and never seemed to have enough. Something felt wrong, but I didn't want to believe it. Maybe you should call and ask directly, Sarah suggested gently. But I was scared of what I might find out. What if David wasn't giving them the money? What if he was lying to me? I decided to wait until Dad's retirement party to see my family in person. It would be the perfect time to talk about finances and make sure everything was going smoothly. I had no idea I was walking into a trap. Sarah came with me to Pine Ridge for the party. She was nervous about meeting my family, especially after all the stories I'd told her. Just be yourself, I said. They'll love you. The drive to Pine Ridge felt longer than usual. Sarah held my hand as we passed familiar farms and small towns. Whatever happens, I'm proud of you for taking care of your family, she said softly. We arrived at my childhood home on Maple Street. The yellow paint was peeling now, and the broken gate still squeaked. David's shiny new truck sat in the driveway next to Dad's old pickup. Mom hugged me briefly, then spent 10 minutes gushing over David's latest business idea. Dad sat in his favorite chair, looking older and more tired than I remembered. He smiled when he saw me but seemed distracted. The party was held in our small backyard under string lights Mom had hung that morning. About 20 people came, family, neighbors, and Dad's co-workers from the mill. Everyone seemed happy to celebrate Dad's retirement. David walked around the party like he owned the place. He wore an expensive suit and a gold watch that caught the light. People crowded around him as he told stories about his business deals and future plans. I sat quietly with Sarah, watching David charm everyone. He's certainly confident, Sarah whispered. Where does a freelancer get money for clothes like that? I shrugged, trying not to think about it. As the party went on, I heard people praising David for taking care of our parents. He's such a good son, Aunt Betty said loudly. Sending them money every month like clockwork. My blood ran cold. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table. Other relatives nodded in agreement. David's the responsible one, Uncle Joe added. Not like some kids who forget their parents once they move away. I felt sick to my stomach. Sarah looked at me with worried eyes. The people at this party thought David was the one supporting our parents. They thought I was the selfish son who had abandoned his family. Mom stood up to make a speech about Dad's retirement. She thanked everyone for coming, then looked directly at me with disappointment in her eyes. Some children understand family responsibility better than others. Then came the words that shattered my heart. Marcus, you'll never be half the man your brother is. David is our real blessing. He takes care of us while you live your fancy life in the city. The backyard went silent. 20 pairs of eyes stared at me, judging me for being the ungrateful son. Sarah's hand tightened on mine, giving me strength I didn't know I needed. Something inside me snapped. Years of being compared, years of feeling worthless, years of sending money while getting no credit, it all exploded at once. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the concrete. Fine, I said, my voice shaking but clear. If David is such a great son, then David can handle everything from now on. I won't send another penny to this family. Dad looked confused. What are you talking about, Marcus? You never sent us money. You barely even call. Mom nodded, her face twisted with anger. Don't lie to make yourself look better. Sarah watched me with supportive eyes as I pulled out my phone. My hands were trembling, but I opened my banking app and found 2 years' worth of transfers to David's account. Here, I said, holding up the screen for everyone to see. $1,500 to $2,000 every month for 2 years. All sent to David's account with notes saying it was for Mom and Dad's expenses. The backyard was so quiet you could hear the neighbor's dog barking 3 houses away. Dad's mouth fell open. Mom stared at the phone screen like it was written in a foreign language. Aunt Betty whispered, "Oh my goodness." Uncle Joe leaned forward to get a better look. Sarah stood up beside me, her voice gentle but firm. Marcus has been supporting your family for 2 years. He works extra hours and lives simply so he can help you. All eyes turned to David. His confident smile disappeared, replaced by the look of a child caught stealing cookies. He started to stammer, "I can explain, it's not what it looks like." Dad found his voice first, though it was weak and confused. David, what is this? Where did that money go? Mom looked between the phone and David's face, trying to understand what was happening. David's expensive clothes suddenly looked like a costume. His gold watch seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds on his wrist. He couldn't meet anyone's eyes as the truth became clear. David started, then stopped. The confident young man who had charmed everyone at the party was gone. In his place stood a scared boy who knew he was caught in a terrible lie. I gave them some of it, he finally whispered. Just not all of it. I had debts to pay, and I needed to look successful. I was going to pay it back when my business took off. The backyard erupted in whispers and gasps. People started putting pieces together. David's new truck, expensive clothes, fancy dinners. All bought with money I had sent to help our parents. Mom covered her face with her hands and started crying. Dad stared at David like he was looking at a stranger. How much did you give us out of what Marcus sent? He asked quietly. David's voice was barely audible. Maybe 300 or 400 a month. I told you it was from me. The math was simple and heartbreaking. He had kept most of the money for himself while I lived on instant noodles. Sarah put her arm around me as I felt my legs get weak. 2 years of sacrifice, 2 years of living small so my family could live better. And they never knew because David had stolen both my money and my credit. Marcus, Mom said through her tears, we had no idea. We thought you didn't care about us anymore. David told us you were too busy with your career to help family. The relatives who had judged me minutes earlier now looked ashamed. Uncle Joe cleared his throat. Marcus, I owe you an apology. We all do. Aunt Betty nodded, her face red with embarrassment. But I wasn't interested in apologies from people who had judged me without knowing the facts. I was interested in the truth from my own family, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Dad struggled to stand up from his chair. His breathing was labored, but he managed to walk over to me. Son, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were helping us. I thought. He couldn't finish the sentence. Mom wiped her tears and looked at me with new eyes. You've been taking care of us this whole time, and we treated you like you didn't care. How can you ever forgive us? David finally spoke up, his voice cracking. Marcus, I'm sorry. I know sorry isn't enough, but I never meant for it to go this far. I kept thinking I'd make the money back and nobody would know. I looked at my little brother, the golden child who had always been perfect in our parents' eyes. Now he stood there exposed as a liar and a thief. Part of me felt sorry for him, but a bigger part felt angry and betrayed. You didn't just steal my money, I said quietly. You stole 2 years of my parents knowing that I cared about them. You let them think I was selfish while you played the hero with my sacrifice. The party was over. People started leaving quietly, avoiding eye contact and whispering among themselves. The celebration had become a family reckoning that nobody wanted to witness. Sarah and I packed our bags that night. I couldn't stay in that house with the weight of so many lies hanging in the air. Are you okay? She asked as we loaded the car. I wasn't okay. I was hurt, angry, confused, and exhausted. But I was also relieved that the truth was finally out. I will be, I told her. It's going to take time, but I will be. The drive back to Denver was quiet. Sarah let me process everything without trying to fix it or analyze it. Sometimes love means just sitting with someone in their pain. Over the next few weeks, I had to figure out what came next. My parents called every day, apologizing and begging for forgiveness. David sent long text messages promising to pay back every penny. But trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. I had spent my whole life trying to prove I was worthy of my family's love, only to discover they didn't even know I was trying. Sarah helped me see that I needed to set boundaries. You can forgive them, she said, but you don't have to go back to the way things were. You deserve better than being invisible. I wrote my parents a letter explaining how their favoritism had affected me. I told them about feeling worthless and invisible, about working extra hours just to help them while they praised David for my sacrifice. Mom called after reading the letter, sobbing so hard she could barely speak. We never knew we made you feel that way. We just thought David needed more attention because he was younger and more fragile. Dad got on the phone too. Son, we failed you. We were so worried about David fitting in that we forgot you needed love too. Can you forgive two old fools who didn't know any better? Their words helped, but wounds that deep don't heal overnight. I agreed to start fresh with them, but only if things changed. No more comparisons, no more favoritism, and complete honesty about money. I set up a direct transfer to Mom and Dad's account so they would know exactly where the money came from. I reduced the amount to what I could comfortably afford without sacrificing my own well-being. David eventually found a steady job and started paying back what he owed. It took him 3 years, but he kept his word. More importantly, he started being honest about his struggles instead of pretending to be perfect. Sarah and I got married 2 years later in a small ceremony in Denver. My parents came, and for the first time in my life, they bragged about me to anyone who would listen. Our son Marcus is an engineer, Mom told the hotel clerk proudly. He designs airplane parts and takes wonderful care of his family. It was the recognition I had waited 30 years to hear. At the wedding reception, Dad stood up to make a toast. To Marcus, the son who taught us that quiet strength is just as valuable as loud confidence. We're proud of the man you've become. David was my best man, and in his speech he said, I spent years living in the shadow of my own lies while my brother lived in the shadow of our parents' mistakes. Marcus is the better man, and I'm proud to call him my brother. The years that followed weren't perfect, but they were honest. My parents made an effort to treat David and me equally. They asked about my work and celebrated my achievements without comparing them to anyone else's. I learned that family love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. My parents loved me all along. They just didn't know how to show it fairly. When they learned better, they did better. Sarah and I built a good life together in Denver. We bought a house with a workshop where I could build things just for fun. She started her own accounting business, and we supported each other's dreams. We had 2 children, Emma and Jake. I made sure they both knew they were loved equally and uniquely. Emma loved to paint, and Jake loved to build robots like his dad. Both interests were celebrated in our home. My parents visited often and spoiled their grandchildren equally. They never compared Emma and Jake or played favorites. They had learned that love multiplies when it's shared fairly, not divided by competition. David eventually married a wonderful woman named Lisa who helped him become more honest and responsible. They had a daughter, and David made sure to tell her she was special without putting down her cousins. We started having family reunions every summer where all the cousins played together while the adults watched and remembered what family was supposed to feel like. Love without conditions, support without competition. Looking back, I'm grateful the truth came out that day at Dad's retirement party. It was painful, but it freed all of us from the lies we had been living. Sometimes families need to break before they can heal properly. I still send money to help my parents when they need it, but now they thank me and tell me they're proud of my generosity. They understand the sacrifice involved because they see me clearly now. David and I became real brothers instead of competitors. We talk regularly and support each other through life's challenges. The golden child and the invisible child both grew up to be good men. My story isn't unique. Many families struggle with favoritism and comparison. Children grow up feeling invisible while siblings bask in attention. But these patterns can change if people are willing to face the truth. If you're living in someone else's shadow, know that your worth isn't determined by comparison. You are valuable just as you are, and the right people will see that value without you having to prove it constantly. If you're a parent, remember that children need to feel loved for who they are, not for how they compare to their siblings. Every child has different gifts, and all of them deserve recognition. The truth may hurt when it first comes out, but it's the foundation that real relationships are built on. Lies might seem easier in the moment, but they create distance between people who should be close. Today, I'm 40 years old with a family that loves me openly and honestly. Sarah and I celebrate 20 years of marriage next month. Our children are teenagers who feel secure in our love. My parents are in their 70s now, and I'm grateful for the years we've had to rebuild our relationship. They tell me they're proud of me, and I finally believe them because their actions match their words. David runs his own successful business now, a real one built on hard work instead of borrowed money and stolen credit. He's a good father and an honest man who learned from his mistakes. We still gather for holidays and birthdays, but now these occasions are celebrations instead of competitions. The grandchildren know they are all special in different ways, and they support each other instead of competing. Sometimes I think about that scared 12-year-old boy who wondered if he mattered to anyone. I wish I could tell him that he did matter, that his quiet strength was valuable, and that someday his family would see it too. Family relationships are complicated, but they don't have to be painful. With honesty, boundaries, and mutual respect, even damaged families can heal and grow stronger than they were before. The shadow I lived in for so long wasn't cast by David's light, it was cast by my parents' inability to see me clearly. When they learned to see me, the shadow disappeared and I could finally shine. If you're struggling with family dynamics, know that change is possible. It takes courage to speak your truth and set boundaries, but it's worth it to live authentically and be loved for who you really are. My relationship with money changed too. I learned to value my own comfort and well-being instead of sacrificing everything for others who didn't even know I was sacrificing. Balance is healthier than martyrdom. Sarah taught me that real love doesn't require you to shrink yourself to fit someone else's expectations. The people who truly love you will make room for all of who you are. This is Marcus Thompson, and that's my story of stepping out of the shadows and into the light of authentic family love. Sometimes the truth hurts, but it's the only foundation strong enough to build lasting relationships on.